Welcome to this episode of Mosaic Days, where we talk all things education, including student achievement and outcomes, professional development and training, and Department of Education and dismantling. This is the
second time that we have done an episode on a dismantling of the Department of Education, this time locally within our state.
Distribution of power?
Yeah.
I am your co-host, Leonard Martinez.
And I'm Allison Smith.
So this is a hot topic alert, right? This is
Definitely
just fresh off the press, I believe, late last week.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today?
Yeah, and it is a hot topic. We needed to get in here and discuss this. We are down in San Diego at a conference, and so it was something that we needed to put on our radar right away. So, this is Governor Newsom released his budget proposal, and an aspect of that had to do with the Superintendent of Public Instruction and what his ultimate role is and where he is going to support, I guess, moving forward, what his purpose is going to be, he or she, the purpose moving forward. So currently for California, that's Tony Thurmond.
And I hate to say it like this because we're so far removed from what the state does and CDE and the Superintendent of Public Instruction. We're in the trenches. We're day-to-day operations. We're working with students. We're working with teachers. Working with families. So it's almost more like an idea. Like I don't know what, like tangibly, what like concrete. You know what I'm going to say, and I don't mean it in a derogatory way, or maybe I do. What does the Superintendent of Education do in the state of California? And for that matter, what does Newsom do directly besides saying, "Hey, this is the budget"? This is all part of his release of the budget, right? Yeah. So what does that person really do? So they're really kind of looking at trying to reorg it. You did mention we are in beautiful San Diego for the AXA Every Child Counts, which probably will be a topic of a future episode. But we know this is hot off the press. Everyone's talking about it. But it sounds like everyone has been talking about it for over 100 years, right?
Yeah.
So this dates back when we looked at the history. In 1920, they started talking about how with the State Board of Education and the governor and the superintendent, who's responsible for what, who's accountable for what, and who's in charge of whom.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like different policies. So it sounded like the governor is coming forward and putting together policies with the State Board of Education. And then a completely separate entity to that is the Superintendent of Public Instruction, who has his own structures and processes he's trying to do with the California Department of Education.
And he runs the Department of Education.
He's supposed to run the Department of Education. So the interesting thing is that these two entities have been working together over here separately a lot of times. And I think that has been criticism from a lot of the education advocacy groups that are saying, nobody really knows who's supposed to be doing what and who's in the ultimate leadership role. And I think, we saw back in COVID. So I take COVID as, one of the things for California that we recently had to focus on. Oftentimes we would see Governor Newsom up there speaking to what was happening with schools and what the policies of the schools were. And then we would receive guidance from our county superintendents, from our county offices of education.
We would?
There was not a lot from our Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Don't get me started.
So I think, a lot of the advocacy group, like you said, since 1920 has said there really is not a clear delineation of who is the leader over educational programs and policies and who ultimately is going to do this. So my understanding is that this whole thing is going to shift that and bring the power back to the governor to make those educational decisions. Is that what you got out of the interpretation?
I think so. So this whole, I want to say recent, but we talked about 1920, start talking about how is this divided and this is the best way of doing it. There's not a lot of states that do it the way we do it. And in the current system right now, we have Governor Newsom, who's elected. He appoints a State Board of Educators. On this end over here, we have the Superintendent of Public Instruction, who is also elected and runs CDE. So there is kind of a separation in how integrated are they? So, but really, besides 1920 and 100 years ago, they've been trying to align the powers that be to streamline the process. We have this PACE report that came out in December. And again, which continue to recommend that we need to do a reorg in order to streamline this process And in theory, that ultimately is going to benefit students. I mean, I hope this isn't a political move. It kind of doesn't seem like it because Newsom's terming out and Thurmond, they're both terming out. Yep. So people are trying to look like, hey, are they trying to, is it a jab against Thurmond? A little too, if they're going to jab Thurmond, too late for that. They could have done it years ago and they didn't do that. So it's probably not personal because they're both terming out. And Thurmond is running for governor. So he has, this could give him more educational power if he wins that election that's coming up. So, but the PACE is a policy analysis for California education. They did this review and they put out this publication last month that talked about reorging. And so I guess Newsom kind of took that as a way to springboard what this effort may look like. And PACE is, I mean, it's high-level universities. We looked at it. It's Cal, it's SC, it's Stanford, it's Davis, and UCLA, I think, is the five. I mean, those are the powerhouse universities in the state and arguably in the country. You know, my concern, though, is, again, people are so far removed from what we do on a day-to-day basis. Some would argue we're removed away from the day-to-day operations of instruction as administrators. So I find it a little troublesome or worrisome, one of those two words, if I can figure it out, about how people are making decisions about organizing or reorganizing education when they really kind of don't have an idea of what the day-to-day operations are. I wish, you know me, I wish they would talk to people who knew education as well as we know education. And just because you're a teacher, just because you're an administrator, just because you're a staff member or a community member, doesn't mean you're participating in the educational system. That at times does not make you an expert. And so I feel like people are making decisions. I want to know why they're making those decisions or how they're deriving to their conclusions in order to make these recommendations when they're really far away from the day-to-day operations.
Yeah, I mean, what I do appreciate is that they're trying to move. There was a reference in one article about moving in the needle forward with California education. You know, and the reality is that there really has been a lot of up in the air, like who does what and who's overseeing the entire process. I do appreciate them trying to say, you know, this is the structure, this is the new organization chart, this is who's responsible, because there are two complete separate entities. And in fact, Thurmond's big opposition, one of the things is that he had no idea that this was happening, right? So then that goes to show how those two maybe fragmented, do not speak to one another, those two offices. Yeah. And was there, you know, this is a decision obviously made by the governor, but with zero input from the Superintendent of Public Instruction, zero input from CDE. So that's one of those things where, you know, I appreciate that they're clarifying, but then are they going to be removing positions? Are they going to be adding positions? I mean,
so we know they're going to add one position. So part of the reorg, at least if they go by the PACE recommendations, right? And probably are, because the announcement came right after the PACE report came out last month. The recommendation is, again, so the current model seems like Newsom's elected, he appoints a state board of education and they're developing policy, right? And budget with fiscal. Over here, we have the superintendent of public instruction, who is elected, and he runs CDE, and there's some type of communication that goes on, and that's what, you know, the fragmentation of it. Under the new system with the reform they're talking about, it seems like governor, whoever the governor is, because I'm not going to be Newsom when this happens, whoever the governor is going to appoint, again, the State Board of Education, and they're going to appoint a director of CDE. So basically, this umbrella where the superintendent was overseeing CDE, that seems like it's going to be folded under the state board and Newsom. And so it's so weird, because now if you're removing that responsibility from the superintendent of public instruction, now they're in isolation. And now, and they're still going to be voted in. But what is their responsibility going to look like now that you've basically taken away all of the resource, all the staff? What is that person left to do?
So they use the term ombudsman, champion of advocacy, and also dealing with investigations, but also through the PACE recommendation, it was oversight over the county office of education. So all of the county offices. I would like to, we took a look at the org chart for CD8, and I would love to know what all those people do, because I think I counted something like 22 plus directors within that organization in different, what do they call them, in different paths or areas. And so I would love to kind of have them, if they're going to do this and they're going to do a complete overhaul of kind of what are the roles of these two higher up people, then what does everybody else do? And what is the responsibility of everybody else? Because this goes back to our discussion that we had around the United States Department of Education and being really clear on what people within the Department of Education actually do and what their purpose is. And if we could get some sort of, assurances that we will have clarification around that, I mean, I would appreciate that, because I'm not quite sure what all those directors do, what all of those branches do. Directors, associate superintendents, and then you have the superintendent of publication, public instruction. So, I think there does need to be alignment, and there is support for this move from a lot of the big organizations. So you see ACSA, the Association of California School Administrators, the president of the California County Superintendents, CASBO, which is our California Association of School Business Officials. Even my good alma mater, USC Rossier School of Education, is in support. And I know you had mentioned some others as well, that there's a lot of support, not a lot of opposition to this.
Yeah. And again, going back to the organization, I think one of the beliefs is if they appoint a director of CDE who has to go through a confirmation process, that they're going to find someone who's an expert in education. Whereas they had some of the information we looked at said all the previous superintendents of public instruction had no educational backgrounds. Yeah. It's like, of course, that's just mind-boggling, right? Yeah. That you have a superintendent of public instruction that has zero education experience seems to me one of the ways of not running a department right.
Well, and we've had that, though, in some of the larger districts within our state.
Well, LAUSD is the biggest example.
I mean, the last two superintendents have not had educational
experience. There's an admiral, right? I think there's a Navy admiral. There's a
business, a finance guy, and so, I agree with you, and having kind of that trickle down, and I don't, Tony Thurmond, I don't know his background and kind of
not education,
what he was in before, but it's, when we're appointing people like this, are the voters really understanding who they're voting for? And does it make more sense then that the governor is making a recommendation of somebody that he knows is strong in the knowledge of education?
Well, you bring up a good point, though, because, and I'm still trying to understand, and as many people, we're in talks right now. Everyone's in preliminary. Everyone's doing preliminary talks. How is this going to change things and the reorg? That he didn't offer a lot of specificity. We can assume he's going to go by the PACE recommendations. But the logic for what people have been saying is is that now it's going to be political, right? Because if there's a Democratic governor who appoints the state board, Democratic state board, they're going to choose a director of education that's going to have a political alignment. But California is relatively Democratic anyway. So I'd like to see, and I haven't done the research on it, as how often is the governor political party different than the superintendent, right? So Newsom's Democrat. Has the superintendent been Republican? And I would probably think not. Yeah. So kind of that one didn't make sense to me, why they think it's a conflict of interest when typically in this state, at least for now, for the foreseeable future, we've been voting along Democratic lines as the winners in some of those higher up offices.
Yeah. And so Thurmond's opposition, because he is opposed to this, but he's saying that he doesn't have a clear understanding, but he's also saying that this could be beneficial only if the person behind him is an advocate for public instruction. If they are not an advocate for public instruction, that's where it's going to backfire, right? So, but again, should we be leaving this up to voters who really are not aware and are not in the school system in order to determine what is appropriate for supporting our CDE?
Well, we're also reading some of the political controversy that there's a political motivation why Thurmond may be moving and kind of, if you look at it, disempowering the superintendent position, because I guess there's maybe one or two candidates for superintendent currently that have strong conservative religious beliefs. Again, the state's been, or the country really been, riddled with the issues about males participating in female sports and gender identification to parents, and how should the school districts be responsible for informing parents when students are having gender identification processes that they're going through. And so some of the belief out there is that he's disempowering that position in case there is a conservative religious person that moves into that position.
But again, he's on his way out. Thurmond's on his way out. That's why it's interesting, and something that you and I have talked about is it's interesting that this is happening now. Now, the PACE report just came out at the end of December. So I can understand why he's making the recommendations, because he's going off of the recommendations. But why is he moving so quickly on it, given that his term is done? Thurmond's term is done.
Yeah.
Why are we making these decisions now, I guess? I mean, granted, this has been up and coming since 1920 and nothing has ever happened. I mean, what's happened for the last 100 years?
And this is what I was going to say.
That's what I want to know. What's been going on for the last 100 years?
Nothing. Nothing, unfortunately. And this is where my belief is that you can reorg it however you want. It's, I don't think, going to have an immediate impact on the day-to-day operations. That's what it comes down to. You can align all these mandates. I mean, again, we're taking a look at ethnic studies. Ethnic studies is supposed to be a mandate for next year. And as we took a look at some of the things that they were proposing in some of these assembly bills and Senate bills, asterisk, if funding's available. So again, when we take a look at just ethnic studies as a mandate for 26-27, asterisk, if funding's available. If funding's not available from the state, then guess what? It's not a mandate anymore. And that's the way it's written into the law. So we can say they can create these policies, but if they don't back it up, and that was one of Thurmond's counterpoints too. If you're not funding education appropriately, then nothing's going to happen. Yeah. And I think, it's hard for me not to be hypercritical about, some of the things that the state does, because, COVID turned over a lot of superintendents and directors and administrators because we were not getting the guidance and we were not getting the support. So it's hard I would like to think it's hard for any administrator to not be hypercritical of the state, because we feel like they are not doing as much as they can be to support us in the day-to-day operations. Yeah. And so I don't think this is I look at it this way. Is this going to change the way I do my work? Probably not. No. Is this going to impact the way instruction is happening in the classroom? Probably not. So what do we make out of this? Well,
at the end of the day, we answer to the special ed division, or if you're an administrator, any other division from CDE. But so I think hopefully there's clarification around their roles and what they do. I mean, for us, I think business is going to continue as normal. I don't see this being an impact on what we're ultimately doing. So I would be in agreement with that.
Yeah, I'd like to see an overhaul of professional development for staff. I mean, you want to make the big impact in education. You want to move needles. Is what they're all talking about, moving needles for student achievement. From a policy standpoint, I don't think that changes things. What changes things is providing specific precision professional development for our staff, providing support for our students, providing support for our families and communities. That's how we get the needle to move.
And money.
No, that's the fiscal part of it. So
the fiscal aspect of it. At the end of the day, you could do all of that and you don't have the money, like you were saying, and nothing is going to move forward.
But the money's like a baseline almost, right? You have to have the money. The money's got to be earmarked for the appropriate things in order for us to make change. And again, we talk about this on the show, we talk about this off the show. We have very specific ideas on how to increase student achievement, how to increase student outcomes, how we train our staff so that they can be in a better position to work with our kids that have diverse backgrounds. And so until the state has an idea of what that looks like and what that is, and talk to professionals and talk to families that go through these experiences, they're so far removed from this that throwing $10 billion at a problem doesn't fix the problem. And I always use this analogy. You give me a super strong teacher and you give me a new teacher or a weak teacher or a teacher who's not efficacious. Is that a word, efficacious, right? Efficacy, efficacious. Where's my GRE word for today?
Efficient.
I made it up. So you give me an expert teacher, and you give me either a new teacher or a teacher that's not very good. If I gave this teacher $1 million in budget and incentives to produce what this teacher has with no budget and no incentives, no amount of money is going to fix this.
Yeah.
Unless I train. And it isn't, hey, let's do a 2-day training. Let's do a 3-day training. We're talking about ongoing training and coaching to get this teacher to be like this teacher. Money doesn't fix the problem.
Yeah.
And I promise you, we can run that experiment, and I know what the outcome is going to be. And we need to take a look at how we're holding staff members accountable, how we're holding students accountable, how we're holding communities accountable to all engage students so that they can achieve. And it's a multi-pronged approach. And that's the conversations we need to have. Mutual accountability. If I'm telling you, you need to do this, you need to look right back at me and saying, yeah, but I need you to do this. Mm-hmm. And if there's a break in that chain, then nothing's going to happen. And ultimately students are going to suffer. So this stuff at the CDE, I mean, it's good for us to talk about and try to explore what the next steps are going to be in this decision-making process of reorganization. I ultimately don't think it's going to trickle down to us.
Yeah.
I hope I'm wrong.
Well, and you have the PACE Center that is, filled with researchers and advocates and policy writers and all of this stuff, and they do get into school sites, but it's for a snapshot of what we deal with on a daily basis. And so
we should get them on the show.
Yeah, we should. Hey, PACE, you want to come on our show? I think it would be really interesting just to kind of see what their day-to-day. So as they go through this policy document and they actually write out all of this, I know that they've been in schools. I know that they've done observations. I know that they've done all of this. But again, it's a snapshot. They're not there for the 185 days that we are supporting our students.
185 days?
Yes.
You're throwing 5 more days on the calendar?
Well, some schools, they can go up to 185.
That's true.
Right.
That's true. So we used to do 190 back in the day when we had.
Well, but I'm also counting the 5 days of professional development. Are they sitting in to see those professional development sessions? Are they seeing, so, ultimately at the end of the day, there's lots of people that can make recommendations, but if you're not in the trenches doing the hard work, right. What are the outcomes going to look like?
So this is a to be continued, right? To monitor.
It's the state, like the federal, always to be continued. Because we don't know ultimately what the outcome is. And I think everybody is waiting for Newsom to get out his, just kind of see where this is going to go next. Is he going to come up with a new structure? That's what Thurmond was calling him to do. Is there an actual structure in place that you're looking at? Or are you just going to take the base document and go with it? So.
All right, to be continued.
It is to be continued, but definitely
episode.
Hot topic. Now we're going to go enjoy San Diego because I love it here.
Okay.
That's what we're going to
do. This has been Mosaic Days. I'm Leonard Martinez.
And I'm Allison Smith. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Thank you for joining us.